Hello rock and metal fans, welcome to Iridium Rock and Metal Reviews. So, as you all know, Stryper are one of my favourite bands. Always have been, since the 80s, since they first appeared on the scene. And they still are. Absolutely brilliant Christian metal band. In case you don't know who Stryper are, you should do, unless you've been living in a hole somewhere. And I've decided to do their ranking the studio albums. So because we're coming up to the new album by Stryper, which is Even the Devil Believes, which is coming out in September, I thought I would do ranking the studio albums as it is. So I thought about doing it for a while, but I thought it's a perfect time to do it. We're a couple of weeks away now. I've heard a couple of songs off the new album and they are absolutely fantastic. So it's time to rank the studio albums. So with this as well, I'm going to do something a bit special when the album comes out. And this is punishing myself really, because I'm going to do a reaction for each song off the album. So I'm not going to listen to it when it comes out. I can't believe I said that. I'm not going to. I really want to. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a reaction for every song once the album comes out. So for a week or so, try and cram a couple of videos in a day if I can, so I can hear all the songs quickly. But I'm going to do a reaction for each one. So I thought it'd be something a bit different. Since it's such a big album for me that's coming out. So stay tuned for that one. So as we are now, we're going to rank the studio albums. Well, I'm going to rank the studio albums. So this, I'm going to take out the cover album, any live stuff, you know, stuff like that, compilations and all that. So we've got what we got is 10 albums to talk about. And obviously I'm going to rank them 10 to 1. 10 being my least favourite to my favourite. And this was really hard, and because they haven't really released anything really weak as such. Every album's been good to brilliant, you know, so it hasn't been easy, especially the top ones. So I thought, what's the easiest way of doing this? Because sometimes when nostalgia kicks in, sometimes when you talk about, you know, when you're younger and you're brought up on this music and that, and at first glance you can think, you know, that's definitely my favourite album because I had so many years of it when I was a kid and I remember this and I remember that. Then sometimes it's the other way round, because something's new and fresh, it seems like the best album because it's newer and you listen to it more. So I thought what I'd do is I'll go back and I listened to every album and I ranked every song individually, and then I added up that score and divided it by the amount of tracks that are on the album, gave me the score. So that's where we're at. And there are a few surprises, you know, and I'm glad I did it because there's a few surprises for myself and there's a few that I knew that would be where they were, yeah. But it was really interesting to do. So without further ado, we've got 10 albums to talk about. This is my number 10. Okay, so the Yellow and Black Attack, the debut album from Stryper. Well, first of all, it was an EP brought out, and later on they brought it out as they added a couple of tracks on, making it a bit longer, making it more of an album. So I thought it's such an important part of the discography, I will talk about it as an album. And for me, it is the weakest album, but it's still, there's some good tracks on it. Obviously, as we know, it was let down on production. It was produced by Ron Goody and Stryper, so it was a bit muddy, the production, and it's probably, as Stryper the band didn't do him any real favours, because they're a real intricate band, but especially when it comes to the guitars, and it had sort of a bit of a flat production. You know, it wasn't the best, but you know, there were some really good tracks in between. And you know what, being a debut album, some bands, don't they, that's their peak, and they bring out a debut album and it's the best thing they do for the rest of their career, and it's always remembered as a great debut, but they never could top it. You know what, I'd rather have it this way round, where they have brought out some outstanding albums that are so much better than their debut album. But like I said, it was still good. It was released on the Enigma label, July the 21st, 1984. And it was good for what it was, but it sounded like a band who was finding their feet, you know. And obviously, look, you haven't got loads of money to spend on production on your first album, and that's exactly what it sounds like. It sounds like a typical 80s sort of production where a band hasn't got all that money and the label behind them, but still great. And some great songs as well. I'm just going to go through a couple of my tracks. My favourite tracks are Loving You. Absolutely love that track. You Know What to Do. It's probably my favourite songs on that particular album. But a really good effort for what it was. You know what I mean? And I've actually given it a score as well. It actually worked out a 6.9. So we're going to, you know, I know that's a bit detailed, but that's the way it's going to be, because a lot of these would have scored the same if you're talking about rounding it up. So 6.9, brilliant for a debut album. Excellent effort by Stryper, you know, finding their feet, like I said. Next, number 9. So, Reborn, released August the 16th, 2005 on Big Free Records. Now, the band took a long time off, and this album was actually originally a Michael Sweet solo album, and then he said to Big Free Records, you know what, this could be a Stryper album, you know, and it was released as a Stryper album. And I'm so glad it was, because obviously that kicked the band off again and to produce some of the great music they're doing now. So even though it was a good album, it wasn't what they would become again. You know, it was a step towards it. It wasn't what they was, you know, in their classic 80s either. But, you know, I think it's quite an underrated album, this. Produced by Michael Sweet and Kenny Lewis. And this was the first release for 15 years. But you know what, if you didn't have this album, you wouldn't have had what's to come. But I think there's some real good gems on this, and some of my favourites are off of Reborn are Make You Mine, was a great track, and you know what, that's probably the standout track for me, but there's a lot of others that are quite strong. The opener, Open Your Eyes, If I Die, I quite like. So, you know, it wasn't up to the standard of Stryper, what they were in the 80s and what they would become, but it's still a solid album, you know, and sometimes overlooked, I think, by a lot of people. So it was a really good album, but that stands at my number 9. Next, my number 8. Murder by Pride, released July the 21st, 2009. Produced by Michael Sweet on Big Free Records still. So this was a big improvement for me from Reborn. You really started to hear that, you know, that classic Stryper sound come back. The production was good, but it would still get better again, and you know, that's what's really good. What's happened since, you know, they've hit the scene again. They've really improved their sound, getting back to sound some new elements, but still having that 80s sound. And this was the start of it, really, for me. A great album. Another one, really, that's a little bit overlooked, you know, but you can sort of understand why, because they've got so many good albums within their catalogue. You know, you can't help but compare. But it was a really good effort and a step towards, like I said, yet again, for what they would become, which is a great band like they have been. And, you know, it's hard, isn't it? All the way through those difficult times, the 90s and the early 2000s were difficult times for bands, for heavy metal bands of this sort of sound, you know, classic metal. And, you know, they've always sort of stuck mainly to what they are good at and what the fans want to hear. And some of the good tracks on here, Four Leaf Clover, I love. I love the cover of the Boston Peace of Mind track, and the track Murder by Pride is also a brilliant song. So this was a lot less filler than Reborn. You know, I think this was a great record, and I scored this at 7.2. So you can see these scores. I mean, if you score anything a 7 for an album, that's a really good album, you know. So that's at my number 8, so you can tell what's to come. So next, my number 7. So, Against the Law, released August the 21st, 1990 on Hollywood Records. So, This was a strange time for the band, and as a Stryper fan, I was a little bit, at the time, I was a little bit disappointed in this release, and I've probably a lot of Stryper fans were, you know. They went in a different direction. You can really understand because of what was going on with the band, and, you know, they was having issues with the church and saying about their music, and they couldn't be Christians because they play heavy metal and all that rubbish. And, you know, it was a shame how the band probably let it get into their heads, but you can't help it, you know. They were trying their hardest to put their message across, and then they had hassle from all sort of sides, and you probably had a lot of heavy metal fans didn't want to accept them as a Christian band, you know, and then you get the church going against them as well. You can totally understand you know, what they were going through. So they decided to go in a bit of a different direction, drop the yellow and black, add sort of leathers and jeans and stuff like that, you know, a lot more straightforward the album sounded than their previous efforts. But you know what, this is a real grower, because especially when I was going through these albums, listening to track by track, some of the songs on this are absolutely brilliant. You know what I mean? It did. I think it sold a little bit poorly, this album. Production was really good. Tom Werman produced this one. It had a real solid production, but it was more back to basics for me, the production, you know, and I think that's what they wanted to get. But some real good standout tracks though on Against the Law. You've got some of my favourites. Two Bodies. Lady is an absolutely brilliant song, but Caught in the Middle as well. Wow. What a song. All for One, love it. Absolute, you know, there's some real classics stuck in some of these songs. You know, it's more of a bluesy sort of thing, which I'm not. That side of any band, I'm not a real fan of the rock and roll bluesy type thing. I'm more of the metal type side, you know. But when you actually listen to these tracks separately, what I have, you understand what brilliant songs they had on this album. So a brilliant effort by Stryper Against the Law, but a difficult time for the band, like I said, to produce that sort of music. Kudos to them. Do you know what I mean? So that was my number 7. Next, my number 6. So number 6, In God We Trust. So released June the 28th, 1988. Produced by Michael Lloyd and Stryper on Enigma Records. So To Hell with the Devil, when that, you know, the expectations after To Hell with the Devil came out, I was a little bit, I really got into this album, but I was also a little bit disappointed at the same time. I think, you know, when you get the level, you sort of, as fans, expect, you know. And I didn't think it was on the same level, and I still don't, as To Hell with the Devil. But I think a lot of that's to do with production as well. Now, I think even the band ain't been too happy with the production. It's a little bit sugary, not really strong enough. I would like the bass to come up a bit more, the guitars a bit heavier. But song-wise, some of the best stuff they've produced, you know. But this also was a big part of my life growing up. And although I thought it was a little bit weaker than To Hell with the Devil, it was still a great album. And some of the standout tracks for me on In God We Trust, My favourite track is actually a ballad on it, Lonely. I love that track. So many memories for that. The actual title track's good, In God We Trust. In the World of You and I is a brilliant song. But probably another one of my favourite ones, The Writing on the Wall. What an heavy track. Absolutely love it. Some real classic songs. You wonder what some of this would have been like with that really cool production. But it does affect it. There's no doubt about it. And I was trying not to let production play too much of a part on it. But it does. You know, and it does. And look, their production now. It's absolutely fantastic. So that helps with the scoring, you know. So that was my number 6, I believe. Next, my number 5.
Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me.
Goddamn Evil, April the 20th, 2018, Stryper's newest release. Obviously barring their one that's going to come out in a couple of weeks. So even though this is number 5 on my list, don't get me wrong, this is a fantastic album. And, you know, barring a couple of songs, could have been right up there. So obviously controversial album title, Goddamn Evil, even though I don't think it was. Walmart thought it was, but what a ridiculous thing, taking it off the shelf at Walmart. And obviously Michael Sweet, which I read about, was very disappointed. And why shouldn't he be? You know, people can't open their minds to an album title. I thought it was a really clever album title, to tell you the truth. Produced by Michael Sweet, and what a fantastic production. It really has been the last few albums on Frontiers Records, a great label for Stryper to work with. Absolutely love this album, but it didn't quite make it right to the top, but it was still, for me, fantastic. 7.9 I scored this, so, you know, a great album. And my favourites on here, Sorry, what a great track. Beautiful, Can't Live Without Your Love, but my favourite track on here is The Valley. Love it, love that song. Absolutely fantastic album. That's my number 5. Moving on to my number 4. What an album. Soldiers Under Command, released May the 16th, 1985, produced by Michael Wagner, Stryper's second album. Now, compared to the debut, this is what they needed. The production made the guitars shine right through. What a heavy album this is. I love some of the soloing on this. I think they just came to show what they could do on this. Of course, you got the album cover that was a bit, yet again, a bit controversial. But they really found their sound on this, and oh my God, this was like one of my best albums of the 80s. I love this album. The title track is absolute classic. You've got First Love. What a brilliant song that is. The way that builds up all the way through it and just turns into such an epic ballad. The Rock That Makes Me Roll, and Surrender is probably my favourite track off Soldiers Under Command. What a brilliant, brilliant album. What an excellent answer, you know, to come out after that first album, which was still good, but then to go, you know what, this is what we're all about. And it was a fantastic, one of my favourites from the 80s. 8.3 I scored this. So as you can see, a big jump from the number 5 to number 4. Next, my number 3. Fallen, released October 16th, 2015 on Frontiers. A great production again from Michael Sweet. I love Fallen. It is an absolute fantastic album. And after their little hiatus, when they came back with No More Hell to Pay, and you know, I thought, are they going to be able to live up to that? And wow, did they live up to it? An absolutely brilliant album, full up with absolutely outstanding metal songs. Don't get me wrong, Stryper are a metal band through and through, and Fallen, it just carried on that great songwriting ability that Michael Sweet's got. The band are just fantastic on it. It's so heavy, the guitar sound, it's got such a distinctive sound as well, their guitar sound on all their albums. But I love Fallen. I think it's produced probably my favourite track of all time from Stryper, and that's Yahweh. You know, I was thinking about this as I was going through all the tracks. What is my favourite Stryper song? And I think Yahweh might be my favourite. I think it's got everything. It's about 6 minutes long. It's got twists and turns all over it. I recently reviewed the song. Have a listen to that on my channel. This album's also got Fallen on it. What a song. Heaven, one of my favourite songs. And you know, when I think back in the 80s when Stryper did a slow song, sometimes it would be looked at as a little bit soft or a little bit melancholy, a bit too much. But now when they do their ballads, wow, they are absolutely classic songs. And of course, closes off with King of Kings, an absolutely storming track. What a brilliant album Fallen is. Modern sounding, but giving fans exactly what they want with that metal edge. Absolutely brilliant from Stryper, Fallen. And one of the few bands that are creating brilliant music now if not better than it was all the way back in the 80s when they were classic. So next, my number 2. So, No More Hell to Pay, released November the 5th, 2013. On Frontiers again, production by Michael Sweet, brilliant. So this was the album, I think, where they hit their full stride with their, you know, return, if you like. They was hinting at it on Murder by Pride, but then No More Hell to Pay just brought back everything I love about Stryper, if not gave me even more than what my expectations were, you know, just smashed to bits. So I didn't even know what to think when this album came out. I put it on and I was just blown away. I just thought, how can they release music like this right now? Because so many times, don't we us fans call for bands to bring out music that we used to have, or something near, you know, the classic stuff that we want, you know, that we've grown up with and love, and we never usually get it. Stryper deliver it in spades, don't they? Absolutely fantastic album. My favourite of the new albums, if you like the last 3 albums. And they're so close. All 3 albums are so close. You know, we're nitpicking there. But when I was scoring this album up, there was so many albums that hit, songs that hit 10s and 9s. Revelation's one of my favourite Stryper songs. No More Hell to Pay, what a song. Sympathy, The One, The Legacy. Heard that, listening to that earlier on. Marching Into Battle. Absolutely smashed it on this album. Couldn't have asked for any more. Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Like I said, the favourite of my last 3 albums, but it's so close. But I've scored this quite high, 9.2 this one come out with. So, you know, there's not many albums that score a 9 and it got a 9.2. So brilliant. Oh, you might have worked out already what my number 1 is, but if you haven't, here it is.
Free
So, To Hell with the Devil, released October the 24th, 1986. Produced by Stefan Galfas and Stryper. What an album. And you know what? I did say that the reason I went through every song was to avoid nostalgia, was to avoid it being a new album that it's fresh, and that's why it could hit #1. So I did it the fair way. And as I was going through these songs, there might have been a bit of nostalgia. I don't know, because this was a huge part of my childhood. This was one of the albums that all the way through the 80s I would go back to, even when Stryper released In God We Trust, when they released Against the Law, you know what, To Hell with the Devil, I still went back to it again and again and again. This was, and even though it's only just, this just shows how strong Stryper are now. It's just pipped the post to No More Hell to Pay. It's actually scored 9.3 where No More Hell to Pay scored 9.2. So that just shows you, doesn't it, how strong Stryper are now. And you know what, it might be tomorrow I might think differently. I don't know, because their top albums, their top 5 or 6 that I've scored are so close. This one though, when I was skipping through this and listening to these songs, obviously you got that brilliant start in it with The Abyss. I think it's The Abyss. And when it kicks into Hell with the Devil, wow, what a song. That's a 10 out of 10 song for me. What a song to start off with. Stomping song. Calling on You. What a melancholy, catchy song. Love that song. Free. Wow. What a brilliant song. The Way. Sing-along song. Holding On. Rocking the World. More Than a Man. The only songs that basically it's a perfect album. The only songs that I scored a little bit down on were the ballads, Honestly and All of Me. Where I even like them, but they weren't quite as good for me. And I like ballads, but I think Stryper have done some epic ballads. First Love was one of my favourites, and they produced some brilliant ones now as well. But these two were okay, but they weren't as good as some of the slow songs that they have done. But To Hell with the Devil, what a brilliant song. Like I said, 9.3. You don't usually get albums. I don't usually score albums anywhere near that. My favourite albums, what a brilliant, brilliant discography Stryper have got. So that's it. Like I said, next I'm going to be going through, when the album actually comes out, I'm going to be doing a reaction to every song on the album. I can't wait to do that. I'd love to listen to the whole album, but I was thinking of you guys, and it might be fun to watch me listen to every song first time round. So thanks a lot for listening. If you want to subscribe, please press the red button, bottom right hand corner.